Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving into some of the most controversial and debated figures in American history. Get ready as we count down the top 5 worst US presidents. Buckle up because it's going to be a wild ride through some of the less glorious moments of American leadership. From economic turmoil and political scandals to questionable decisions and lasting negative impacts on the nation, these presidents left their mark on history for all the wrong reasons. We'll unpack their missteps and analyze the lingering consequences of their presidencies. Let's get into it. Starting us off with a presidential party foul is Warren G. Harding, the 29th President of the United States. Harding's presidency from 1921 to 1923 was plagued by scandals. The most infamous, the Teapot Dome Scandal, involved illegal leasing of government oil reserves for bribes. It revealed a level of corruption that shocked the nation. Harding's Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, accepted bribes for access to oil reserves. This cast a long shadow over Harding's presidency. His administration was riddled with cronyism. The scandals led to disillusionment and distrust in the government. Harding wasn't directly implicated in all the scandals. He died in office in 1923 before the full extent of the Teapot Dome Scandal came to light. His lack of oversight created an environment where corruption could flourish. Harding's presidency serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of strong leadership and ethical conduct. It's a reminder that character matters, and the consequences of corruption can be far-reaching. Harding's presidency remains a symbol of government corruption and a reminder that power without integrity can be dangerous. And that's a lesson worth remembering no matter who's in the White House. Next up is Herbert Hoover, the 31st president whose time in office became synonymous with one of the darkest periods in American history, the Great Depression. Hoover, a self-made millionaire and engineer by trade, came into office in 1929 with a reputation for competence and efficiency. He had a track record of success in business and had earned international acclaim for his humanitarian work during World War I. He seemed like the perfect man to lead America into a new decade of prosperity. But then, just 7 months into his presidency, the stock market crashed, plunging the nation into the Great Depression. Hoover's response to the Depression was a mix of traditional economic theory and a belief in rugged individualism. He believed that the government should play a limited role in the economy and that the best way to address the crisis was through voluntary cooperation between businesses, workers, and charities. However, Hoover's policies, based on the idea that the economy would eventually right itself, proved to be too little, too late. The Depression deepened, unemployment soared, and millions of Americans were left struggling to survive. Hoover's insistence on balancing the budget during a time of widespread poverty only made matters worse, as it reduced government spending at a time when the economy desperately needed a boost. Hoover's image also suffered from his perceived indifference to the plight of ordinary Americans. He opposed direct government relief for the unemployed, believing that it would create dependency. His critics painted him as out of touch and uncaring, a symbol of the government's failure to address the suffering of its people. As the Depression dragged on, Hoover's popularity plummeted. In the 1932 election, Hoover was soundly defeated by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who promised a New Deal for the American people. Hoover's presidency serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of laissez-faire economics, the importance of government intervention during times of crisis, and the need for empathy and compassion in leadership. Millard Fillmore, the Fugitive Slave Act, and the Road to Disunion. Our third spot goes to Millard Fillmore, the 13th president, a man whose legacy is forever intertwined with one of the most divisive pieces of legislation in American history, the Fugitive Slave Act. Fillmore, a member of the Whig Party, ascended to the presidency in 1850 following the death of President Zachary Taylor. He inherited a nation deeply divided over the issue of slavery, with tensions between the North and South reaching a boiling point. The Compromise of 1850, a package of bills aimed at diffusing the sectional crisis, landed on his desk. At the heart of this compromise was the Fugitive Slave Act, a law that required citizens in free states to assist in the capture and return of runaway slaves. Fillmore, a moderate on the issue of slavery, believed that the compromise was necessary to preserve the Union. He signed the Fugitive Slave Act into law. arguing that it was his constitutional duty to enforce the law of the land, even if he personally disagreed with it. But the Fugitive Slave Act proved to be anything but a compromise. It ignited a firestorm of controversy, with abolitionists in the North condemning it as a barbaric law that turned free states into hunting grounds for slave catchers. The Underground Railroad, a network of safe houses and secret routes used by escaped slaves, became even more active, as ordinary citizens risked their own freedom to help those fleeing bondage. The Fugitive Slave Act deepened the divide between North and South, hardening positions on both sides of the slavery debate. Fillmore's decision to sign the Fugitive Slave Act into law, while perhaps intended to preserve the Union, ultimately contributed to its demise. It stands as a stark reminder of the moral complexities of leadership, the dangers of compromising on fundamental principles, and the unintended consequences of political expediency. Chapter 4. The Buck Stops. Somewhere else? James Buchanan and the Road to Civil War. Coming in at number 2 is James Buchanan, the 15th president, a man whose presidency is often cited as a textbook example of how not to lead a nation through a crisis. Buchanan, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, took office in 1857, inheriting a nation already deeply divided over the issue of slavery. The issue of slavery's expansion into the Western territories had become a political powder keg, and Buchanan seemed determined to strike a match. Buchanan, a staunch believer in states' rights, argued that the federal government had no power to prevent the expansion of slavery. He supported the Dred Scott decision, a Supreme Court ruling that declared that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, were not considered citizens and had no standing to sue in federal court. Buchanan's stance on slavery alienated many in the North who saw it as a betrayal of the nation's founding principles. His attempts to appease the South only emboldened pro-slavery factions who saw his inaction as a sign of weakness. As tensions escalated, Buchanan seemed paralyzed by indecision. He dithered as states began to secede from the Union following the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. Buchanan argued that while states did not have the right to secede, the federal government had no power to stop them. By the time Buchanan left office in 1861, the nation was on the brink of civil war. His failure to address the secession crisis, his unwillingness to take a firm stand against slavery, and his general air of incompetence left the nation ill-prepared for the tumultuous years that lay ahead. Buchanan's presidency stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of political expediency, the importance of decisive leadership during times of crisis, and the devastating consequences of inaction in the face of existential threats. Andrew Johnson, Impeachment, Reconstruction, and the Legacy of Division. And finally, the absolute worst, Andrew Johnson, the 17th president. Johnson, a Democrat from Tennessee, ascended to the presidency in 1865 following the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He inherited a nation still reeling from the Civil War, grappling with the challenges of Reconstruction and the reintegration of Confederate states into the Union. Johnson, a Southerner who had opposed secession but remained sympathetic to the plight of former Confederates, approached Reconstruction with a lenient hand. He pardoned many former Confederate leaders, allowed them to return to power, and offered little protection to newly freed slaves. Johnson's vision of Reconstruction clashed with the radical Republicans in Congress, who sought to secure equal rights for African Americans and punish former Confederates. Johnson's veto of key Reconstruction legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1866, set the stage for a bitter power struggle with Congress. Johnson's actions, seen by many as an attempt to undermine the progress made during Reconstruction, sparked outrage in the North. His opponents accused him of being a racist, a traitor to the Union, and an obstacle to national healing. In 1868, Johnson's opponents in Congress had had enough. They impeached him on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of justice, stemming from his attempts to remove Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, a radical Republican, from office. Johnson narrowly avoided removal from office by a single vote in the Senate, but his presidency was irrevocably tarnished. Johnson's presidency stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy, the importance of checks and balances, and the enduring legacy of racial division in America. Chapter 6, Lessons from the Hall of Shame. So there you have it, the top 5 worst U.S. presidents. While every leader has their challenges, these presidencies stand out for their particularly negative impacts on American history. By understanding the mistakes of the past, we can hopefully avoid repeating them in the future. From economic mismanagement and political corruption to the defense of slavery and the obstruction of civil rights, these presidencies offer valuable lessons about the importance of ethical leadership, sound judgment, and a commitment to the common good. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more intriguing historical insights. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.